Did you want to go to Reason Rally 2016 on June 4th and can't afford it? Do you want your group to be a part of the biggest atheist and free thought rally in 2016? Now's your chance. Reason Rally 2016 is looking for groups that want to come to the Reason Rally for a great rate. Reason Rally is working with rallybus.net, your online crowdsourced event bus sharing, to bring you to the Reason Rally and to take you home. Go to rallybus.net/reason-rally and sign up today. We need bus captains and organizers to set up groups of 40 or more that can meet up in major cities and ride share. Go to rallybus.net/reason-rally to set yours up today.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Havoc and Chaos Live, a weekly look at some of the batshittery we call news, and the pals, pundits, and other off-the-wall people, myself included, who claim to know what is really going on in our world. I'm an atheist, a lesbian, and I have bipolar disorder, among other things. Therefore, hate of any kind is not welcome in my world. I'm opinionated, and my impulse control went by the wayside months ago. So, I say what I feel. In other words, stupid smart people piss me the fuck off. Be forewarned, I am highly excitable, and if you are easily offended by four-letter words or longer, you may want to go and listen to something else. So, last week we ended our discussion concerning Kent Hovind and Mary Tocco after briefly talking about the Cutter incident. Yes, a tragedy occurred, but the entire narrative is not as dire as those of Tocco's ilk make it out to be. Plain and simple, vaccines work. As I mentioned previous, hidden within Tocco's concern about the polio vaccine are a whole boatload of unsubstantiated claims. Vaccinations have no role in eradication of disease, a simplistic denial of germ theory, and she states that polio was renamed. We'll take a brief look at these three claims, but it's the third that really intrigues me. My introduction to anti-vaccination actually comes courtesy of Bill Maher, which I have discussed before, and due to time constraints I will not rehash his stance. But what the argument boils down to is this, quote,
most vaccine-preventable diseases were on their way to be eradicated just before a specific vaccine to prevent them was introduced, typically because of clean water and healthy diet. They claim that vaccines didn't save us and that vaccines don't even work.
As Vincent Iannelli points out,
the big problem with this idea is that most of these diseases began to be eradicated at different times. Smallpox, diphtheria, polio, measles, etc. If hygiene and better nutrition were the reasons, wouldn't they have been eradicated at the same time?
As Fallacy Man does note concerning this issue,
death rates had declined prior to vaccines, but actual infection rates had not.
Again, with Fallacy Man, who runs Logic of Science, he notes in a piece that deconstructs the anti-vaxxer stance altogether.
The fact that measles death rates had declined prior to vaccines does not, however, mean that vaccines didn't play an important role. This is the problem with the anti-vaccine graph. It is deliberately zoomed out so far that you can't see the impact of vaccines. That is why the pro-vaccine graph is a better representation. It's not zoomed in as an effort to conceal something. Rather, it is zoomed in because that is the only way to see that vaccines did actually have an important impact.
The important takeaway from this, deaths may have decreased, but actual incidences did not. What this graph tells us is that the number of people who were surviving measles increased without vaccine, but the number of people who were getting measles had not changed. I will leave you with one final sight in regards to this topic. The key to this subject, I believe, lays in the final question.
Could you please provide scientific evidence which can prove that disease reduction in any part of the world, at any point in history, was attributed to naturopathy?
Just a quick note before we go on. I am by no means giving these subjects their due justice. In other words, I'm hopefully planting a seed with credible resources for you to take the time to further look into these so-called issues. Point 2. Simplistic denial of germ theory. Now, denial of germ theory in and of itself is a handful. Suffice to say, I'm going to gloss over this area as it is a topic in and of itself. Think Halde-Clark and aggregated toxicity, non-specific toxins, Louis Pasteur's deathbed confession, fruitarianism, raw foods, and more, wrapped up in conspiracy theory. In general, under this topic, you could also add a lack of understanding of how the immune system works. You can insert Kent Hovind here. Basically, the anti-vaxxers' claim goes something like this.
Vaccines are commonly believed to work by producing antibodies. However, a number of researchers have found that the presence of antibodies only indicates that the immune system has come into contact with an antigen. What this means is that we are told of vaccines producing antibodies, which in turn will protect us against disease. It's a lie. The presence of antibodies does not equal immunity.
An overly simplistic view?
If germs aren't the primary cause of infectious disease, then vaccination is unnecessary.
Now, one of the replies to this, and it's kind of technical, goes like this.
An antigen is a surface recognition protein that is present on the outer membranes of cells, or bacterial walls. Each type of cell has a specific antigen that our body can recognize. This is how our immune system tells the difference between ourselves and a foreign cell. So, when you get an infection, your body learns to identify the antigens of the invading cells, and it produces antibodies for those cells. What vaccines do is present your body with antigens without actually giving you the infection. That way, your body produces the necessary antibodies without actually getting sick. So the mechanism that your immune system uses is identical between vaccines and natural immunity. They both produce antibodies in response to antigens.
Now, my understanding of diseases is weak at best. In other words, I really know of no way to break it down any simpler than what I've read and come to understand. What I can say is that the denial of germ theory, as we understand it today, undermines the whole of combating said diseases and illnesses. Just as evolutionary theory is the bulwark of the biological sciences, so too is germ theory. Quote,
Rejecting germ theory is as fundamentally a rejection of science as rejecting evolution, and it just as much involves the rejection of the scientific process that tells us that bacteria causes disease.
And finally, polio was renamed. This whole renaming shtick is what gets me. Quote,
On the extreme end of these anti-vaccine beliefs are those who think many vaccine-preventable diseases were never eradicated at all. They simply believe that doctors and public health experts simply changed the name of the diseases in a big conspiracy to make it seem like the diseases went away. They believe that these diseases, like polio, are still here, just with different names.
End quote. What becomes even more bizarre, in order for something like this to be possible, all healthcare workers would have to be wrapped up in a global conspiracy of mammoth proportions. Like many a con theory, it's a house of cards that collapses under its own weight. And when I say all, I do mean all. Like most con-hunters, anti-vaxxers share some commonalities. 1. I've done my research. They confuse one-sided, cherry-picked information gathering as research. Tocco is a prime example, as she touts her 30-plus years at Google U as experience in fields of immunology, virology, bacteriology, vaccines, and epidemiology.
They now think that they are experts in highly complex fields of biomedical science.
2. Vaccines don't work. In other words, after all your extensive research, what journals are you published in? As Skeptical Raptor aptly notes, quote,
Why should I respect a group of people who cannot provide one single peer-reviewed paper published in a real journal that shows a significant issue with vaccines? They tend to mine news or research for anything that slightly supports their beliefs. while ignoring everything else that does not. They ignore all new research that's supported by other researchers, that's repeated by a wide variety of research groups, and then add it into meta-reviews by respective groups.
I call it the outlier. It's my favorite question to ask, and I do use it a lot. And 3, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And I know we're all familiar with that. Quote,
there is nothing as arrogant as the anti-vaccinationist belief that their opinion is somehow more important than the vast weight of 99.99% of physicians, healthcare workers, researchers, scientists, public health officers, and just about anyone interested in the good health of the community.
Close quote. You've heard me state this on medication. I am not an expert. In areas of uncertainty, I will seek out those with proper qualifications to fact-check my work. Professor Stephen is a good example. When it comes to chemistry, I go to him. If I want paleontology, I'll go to Rachel. And so on. Not so with the AV crowd. They are full of themselves. And I'm talking to diehards, not people that are sitting on the fence. I'm talking people like Kent Hovind, Mary Tocco, Bill Mayer, Jenny McCarthy, and the list can go on ad infinitum. The skeptical raptor notes a lot more commonalities, but I think you get my drift. These are 3 that I experience the most often. As I mentioned last week, my segments or my postings are a means to an end. The path I took to get to my reasoning point. I share it in hopes of showing others what I found helpful. In a way, it's a means to educate others in a simple fashion, but yet give solid resources of how I got there. If my science is wrong or my understanding flawed, I would hope someone smarter than I would straighten my path with solid resources. I think David Gorski sums up well the whole anti-vax sentiment. Quote,
I realize that I am citing anecdotal evidence, which is usually a no-no on SBM. But forgive me for a moment as I lapse into an expression of opinion. It is my perception that many skeptics who are hardcore rational when it comes to issues like evolution, paranormal phenomena, and other areas of pseudoscience all too often tend not to understand the importance of science-based medicine, or even what science-based medicine is. Moreover, there does seem to me to be a strain of sympathy for the anti-vaccine movement among skeptics. I've seen it myself. For example, when I've been to meetings with skeptics, namely people who actually belong to skeptical organizations like CFI, or who attend meetings like the Amazing Meeting, when it comes to vaccine, pharma, and medicine, I am continually discouraged by how many skeptics actually buy into at least some medical pseudoscience. Indeed, recently I have gotten into discussions with a skeptic about vaccines, and I was surprised at how she actually thought there was something to the claimed link between vaccines and autism, and how her doubts could not be easily assuaged. Meanwhile, a lot of skeptics I've encountered, although they don't buy the claims of alternative medicine or the anti-vaccine movement, appear to be shruggies, and that they don't much care about them either, or see why we at science-based medicine get so worked up about them.
I think that sums it up pretty well. We have a tendency to shrug it off. It's a personal choice. Well, personal choice is going to go out the window if polio returns, or flying spaghetti monster forbid, smallpox. Now back to our show with John Webster, author and comedian.